I woke up to that quiet, heavy kind of morning. One of those where everything feels slightly off, but you can't put your finger on it right away. The sun was already creeping through the curtains, painting streaks of gold across the floor. But even that warm light couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in my chest. I reached for my phone out of habit, expecting the usual flurry of texts or calls about tonight's family dinner. Maybe a "don't forget, see you at 6" from my kids, maybe a funny gift from my youngest. But there was nothing, just the blank silence of the morning screen, the phone lying face down like it was hiding from me. I tried to brush it off. Maybe they're busy. Yeah, that's it. They'll call. I repeated it in my head, like a mantra, as if saying it enough times could make the dread vanish. But the pit in my stomach wouldn't budge. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and let my feet touch the cold floor, the chill doing nothing to wake me up fully. Even the smell of coffee, usually a comforting ritual, didn't reach me the way it normally did. It lingered faintly in the kitchen, but I couldn't even feel the warmth in it. I remember that last Sunday vividly. The house had been alive with laughter, the kind that leaves your cheeks sore and your heart full. My kids had been teasing each other over something silly, their voices overlapping in that chaotic, beautiful way only families can. My spouse had smiled from across the table, eyes twinkling, passing me a plate of something I probably didn't even like, but I smiled anyway. Everything had felt normal, safe, whole. Now, as I sat there, staring at the phone, I could almost hear the echo of that laughter bouncing through the quiet of the empty room. My hand hovered over the device, reluctant to pick it up, but also desperate to check one more time. The clock ticked audibly in the background, each second louder than the last, reminding me that time was moving forward, and I still hadn't heard a single word from anyone. I stared at my untouched cup of coffee, its surface dark and still, like a mirror reflecting my own unsettled face. The aroma teased me, comforting and cruel all at once. I took a shallow breath, trying to push down the unease that had settled like a heavy weight in my chest. Something was different this morning, and no amount of reassurance could convince me otherwise. By mid-morning, the quiet had started to feel heavier, almost oppressive. I had checked my phone more times than I cared to admit. Every buzz of a notification made my heart jump, only for it to sink when I saw it wasn't from my kids. Then I noticed the group chat thread for tonight's dinner. My stomach twisted. When I opened it, there it was, a flurry of messages about what everyone was bringing, what time they'd arrive, and my name wasn't mentioned once. I stared at the screen, unable to breathe properly. Wait, did they forget me? The words lingered in my mind, echoing off every corner of the room. It couldn't be intentional, right? Kids can be forgetful, busy, distracted. I tried to rationalize it, tried to convince myself this was nothing. But deep down, there was a prickling, cold suspicion that refused to go away. I sank into the kitchen chair, my hands wrapped around my coffee cup, now cold and neglected. The faint smell of brewing coffee couldn't mask the bitterness rising in my chest. I thought back to last week, when we had all been gathered around the same table, and laughter had filled the air so easily. My youngest had leaned over to whisper something that made me chuckle. My spouse had reached across to pass a plate. Back then, everything felt seamless, connected. Now it felt like a photograph from another life, when I no longer had a place in. I tried to distract myself, scrolling through old photos of family dinners, the memories both comforting and painfully cruel. There we were, smiles wide, plates heaped with food, the chaos of voices overlapping in harmony. I touched the screen lightly, as if I could reach through and sit at that table once more. But reality stayed stubbornly in place, my name not in the chat, my presence uninvited. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional distant car passing by. I glanced at the clock again, feeling the seconds stretch longer and longer. I wanted to tell myself this was a mistake, a simple oversight, but even my own thoughts felt fragile and uncertain. My phone lay on the table again, tempting me to scroll just one more time, as if by staring at it long enough, it might change. But nothing did. For the first time that day, a lump rose in my throat, the sting of hurt creeping in where confusion had been. This wasn't just a missed invitation. It felt like a deliberate absence, a quiet exclusion that wrapped around me tighter than any embrace ever had. And yet, as much as it hurt, I couldn't let myself fall apart. Not yet. I needed to understand. to process, but the silence was deafening. By midday, the uneasy knot in my chest had tightened into something far heavier, something I could no longer ignore. I decided to reach out to one of my kids, trying to keep my voice, or at least my words, casual. Hey, are we still on for dinner tonight? I typed, fingers hovering over the send button far longer than necessary. I pressed send, and the waiting began. The reply came quickly, but it was short, dismissive, almost cold. Oh, yeah, we'll see you later. That, we'll see you later, felt like a door closing slowly in my face. I stared at the screen, my coffee now long forgotten, growing bitter in its cup. My chest tightened. My heart was pounding in a rhythm that didn't belong to any calm, rational thought. Did I do something wrong? Or is this something else? I whispered to myself, though the walls offered no answer. I scrolled through the chat again, rereading lines and rereading them, hoping some hidden meaning would suddenly appear. But the words were clear. I wasn't wanted at the table tonight. Not intentionally. That reality landed on me with the subtle cruelty of a feather falling, somehow heavy enough to knock the wind out of me. Flashbacks came unbidden, sharp and intrusive. I remembered arguments I thought had long passed, moments of tension that I had laughed off at the time. Little things, the sigh when I mentioned wanting to attend a concert, a glance that lingered too long when I suggested a family outing, now replayed with brutal clarity. I hadn't realized those moments had piled up, invisible weight stacked. Silently until today, the room felt smaller suddenly, tighter, suffocating. The faint hum of the refrigerator was like a mocking echo in the empty kitchen. I could feel my hands trembling slightly as I clutched the counter, trying to steady myself. The chair creaked beneath me as I sank into it, the cold floor beneath my feet doing nothing to ground me. That I wanted to call, to demand an explanation, to pour out all the confusion and hurt in one single moment of truth. But something stopped me, a whisper in my mind. Do you really want to know the answer if it shatters everything you believed about them? I realized the betrayal didn't just sting. It was a fracture in the world I had always thought was solid, a silent reshaping of the family I'd loved unconditionally. That I leaned back, my head resting against the wall, letting my eyes close for a moment. The silence pressed in from all sides, and for the first time that day, tears threatened to fall. Not dramatic, not loud, just small, quiet drops of heartbreak that mirrored the quiet emptiness settling in my chest. I had always believed that family dinners were sacred, a constant. Now, it seemed, even constants could vanish without warning. By late afternoon, the initial shock had faded into something heavier, slower, a dull ache that clung to my bones. I tried to stay busy, to busy myself with chores, reading, even scrolling aimlessly through the news, but nothing distracted me for long. Every small sound, every little thing reminded me of what I was missing. The hum of traffic outside felt like a distant party I wasn't invited to. The faint scent of someone else's cooking drifting through the apartment made my stomach twist. Even my own coffee, reheated for the third time, tasted like ash. I found myself staring at old photos again. Smiling faces frozen in time, laughter, captured in pixels, moments I had treasured, now felt like cruel reminders. I saw myself at last year's dinner, passing a plate, laughing at a joke I barely understood, feeling like the center of my own little universe. And now, that universe had shifted without my consent. Maybe I'm imagining it. Maybe it's normal. I whispered, trying to reason with myself, though the words felt hollow. That I wandered from room to room, touching familiar objects, the worn edge of the sofa, the mug I always used, the kitchen counter with its faint ring of spilled coffee, and found no comfort. Each object reminded me of presence, of connection, of routines that had once been shared. Now, even the walls felt like they were closing in, mocking the emptiness around me. Flashbacks returned, short and sharp. A holiday where my kids had crowded around the tree, faces glowing with excitement, pulling gifts from the paper with shouts of joy. I had smiled then, feeling proud, feeling loved. That warmth now felt unreachable, as if it belonged to someone else's memory. The sting was quiet, but relentless, like a clock ticking in a silent room. That I tried to reach out again, just to fill the quiet. Maybe a call, maybe a text, anything. But even the thought of hearing another casual dismissal made my throat tighten. My fingers hovered over the phone, trembling slightly. I was caught between longing and self-preservation, desperate for connection, yet terrified of more rejection. The evening shadows stretched across the room as I sank into the sofa, letting the weight of it all settle. I felt small, invisible, unimportant, and yet, a strange clarity began to rise alongside the pain. This wasn't just hurt, it was a mirror showing me the truth I had avoided. That sometimes, the people you love most can leave you out, intentionally or not, and it's not always a reflection of your worth. For the first time that day, I let myself breathe into the pain. Let the silence wash over me. I didn't fix anything, didn't forgive, didn't demand explanations. I just let the ache exist, and in that acceptance, I found a fragile, quiet strength. I might be alone tonight, yes, but I was still here, still breathing, still myself. By early evening, the numbness that had weighed on me all day began to shift. It wasn't sudden or dramatic, no lightning strike of revelation, but a quiet, creeping awareness that maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to wait for them to include me. Maybe I could reclaim this night on my own terms. That I sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker on one by one, the street below humming with life I wasn't part of. At first, it stung. Every couple walking hand in hand, every group laughing outside a cafe, felt like a reminder of the family I had been shut out from. And then I realized something. All that life going on out there didn't need to include me to exist. It was mine to join in my own way, if I chose. If they don't want me there, maybe I can still take the night back for myself, I thought. Saying it felt strange at first, almost rebellious. But the more I said it in my head, the heavier the courage became, filling the corners of my chest where the emptiness had been. I could either let this exclusion define me, or I could redefine the evening entirely. Flashbacks came again, though these were different. Not moments of hurt or exclusion, but small victories I had achieved alone. Finishing a painting I'd started months ago, seeing the smile of a stranger I helped without expectation, finishing a difficult project at work, all reminders that I had the capacity to create joy and meaning on my own. If I could do those things alone, maybe I could turn tonight into a small, personal triumph. I stood up and walked to the coat rack, feeling the cool fabric of my jacket against my skin. The air outside was crisp, hinting at autumn, and it smelled faintly of rain and leaves. I imagined sitting somewhere warm, a table set just for me, and for the first time that day, a small, genuine smile tugged at my lips. The decision didn't feel like vengeance. It wasn't about making them feel guilty or proving a point. It was something quieter, something far more powerful: self-respect. I didn't need their permission to take up space, to enjoy a meal, to feel worthy. That realization, simple, almost obvious, hit me with surprising force. I grabbed my phone, scrolling to my favorite restaurant, tapping the reservation button with a calm, decisive energy. I didn't even think about texting them, didn't dwell on what they might say. Tonight wasn't about them. It was about me. I could feel the weight in my chest lifting just a little, replaced by the steady, warming pulse of determination. And as I walked out the door, the evening breeze brushing my face, I whispered to myself, almost playfully, let's see how this night goes on my own terms. I walked down the street, phone in hand, the city buzzing softly around me. Every step felt deliberate, like I was carving out my own space in a world that had, until now, left me on the sidelines. The plan wasn't complicated, just a single, quiet act of taking the night back for myself. But the weight of that simplicity made it feel monumental. I scrolled through my favorite restaurants, the ones I'd visited countless times alone or with friends. One name stood out immediately: the place with the warm lighting, the small jazz band that played soft evenings, the corner table by the window with a perfect view of the city lights. I could almost feel it, the polished wood under my fingers, the faint aroma of fresh bread and herbs, the hum of conversation floating around me like music. If they won't give me a table at home, I'll take the best table elsewhere, I thought. And this time it wasn't rebellious. It felt right. It felt like reclaiming something that had never really belonged to them to begin with. I tapped the phone screen, confirmed the reservation, and felt a small thrill rise in my chest. Anticipation. A quiet, self-respecting excitement that prickled along my skin like electricity. I thought about the way I would arrive. A soft smile. on my lips, calm, collected, entirely in control of the night. No anger, no resentment, just presence. I pictured walking in, greeting the host, taking that table by the window, and letting the city lights frame my quiet victory. I imagined the small rituals, the napkin carefully folded, the fork placed just right, the menu opened slowly, savoring. The anticipation of a meal prepared and enjoyed for me alone. Flashbacks rose again, this time gentler. I remembered evenings spent alone with a book, a glass of wine, the faint music in the background, realizing even then that solitude could be a sanctuary. Those memories reassured me. I could enjoy tonight. I could feel seen, even if only by myself. I tucked my phone into my pocket, the click of the lock button feeling like a final, deliberate choice. The evening stretched ahead, full of possibilities. I could let resentment dictate the night, or I could step into it fully, embrace it as my own. And I chose the latter. The streets smelled faintly of rain, leaves crushed under the tires of passing cars, and the air had that sharp, clean edge that makes every breath feel alive. I straightened my jacket, shoulders back, and let myself walk with a new rhythm, one that belonged entirely to me. Tonight was mine, and I was ready. The restaurant's warm glow spilled out onto the sidewalk as I approached, soft golden light against the deepening night. The city sounds faded slightly, muffled by the glass doors, replaced by the gentle hum of conversation and the clinking of silverware. I paused for a moment, just outside, letting myself breathe it in. The aroma of fresh bread, the subtle scent of herbs and roasted meats, the faint notes of jazz drifting from inside. That I stepped through the door with a calm I hadn't felt all day. The hostess smiled, and I returned it, quietly confident, asking for the best table. My words were simple, polite, but underlined with a quiet sense of ownership, like I had finally remembered that I deserved this space. She led me to the corner table by the window, the one I had pictured all afternoon, and I felt a small thrill of triumph. This was mine, no explanations needed, no apologies required. That I sank into the chair and let my fingers brush the polished wood of the table, grounding myself in the reality of the moment. The city lights twinkled just beyond the glass, reflecting softly on the table, and I realized how powerful it felt to be present entirely on my own terms. Look at this. I belong here too, in my own way, I thought, a quiet smile tugging at the corners of my lips. That I glanced around, noticing the small details, the soft lighting highlighting the gentle curves of the decor, the subtle warmth in the air, the low murmur of conversation that felt comforting instead of distant. The napkin was folded neatly, the menu inviting me to choose without hurry or distraction. Every element was a reminder that tonight didn't need to be dictated by anyone else's actions or absence. That a flash of memory surfaced. My kids, years ago, running around this very city, laughter echoing through the streets after a family meal. My chest ached for a moment, a pang of bittersweet nostalgia, but I let it pass without clutching at it. This night wasn't about reclaiming what was lost. It was about embracing what was still mine. I looked out the window again, watching the reflections shimmer against the glass. The hum of life outside, the lights, the subtle energy of the city, it all felt like a quiet celebration. I was smiling at myself now, not out of defiance, not out of spite, but because I had chosen to be here. Fully, unapologetically, and entirely. For me, for the first time that evening, I felt the warmth of pride mixed with relief, a subtle, deep kind of victory that didn't need applause. The night was mine, and I could finally savor it. Sitting at my table, the first sip of wine warming my chest, I finally allowed myself to look around. Families and couples filled the restaurant, laughter and conversation weaving a tapestry of life I wasn't part of, yet somehow could still observe without bitterness. The sound was soft, comforting even, a reminder that joy existed everywhere, not just at the table I had been excluded from. A couple near the window caught my eye. They were leaning into each other, laughing over something small, a shared joke, that made them glow. And for a moment, something unexpected rose inside me, longing. A pang of nostalgia for the family dinners I had once taken for granted, when my kids' laughter had filled the room so completely it was impossible to think anything could ever go wrong. I closed my eyes briefly, letting myself remember. I could see it clearly. their small hands reaching for plates, the way my youngest had leaned against me while giggling, the soft murmurs of my spouse as they passed food. That warmth, that closeness, it had felt endless, infinite. And yet here, I was, alone, a quiet witness to joy that felt both painfully familiar and achingly distant. But the sting wasn't as sharp as it had been earlier. Sitting here, I realized something. Even though I wasn't at that table anymore, even though the invitation had never come, I could still feel the love I had poured into those moments. It didn't vanish just because the present excluded me. I could honor it, remember it, and carry it forward. Without letting their absence define my night, I took another slow sip of wine and let the candlelight flicker across the polished table. The warmth of the small flame mirrored a sense of inner calm settling in me. I had a choice. I could let resentment consume the evening, or I could embrace this solitude as a space for reflection, for quiet grace. And for the first time that night, I felt peace. Flashbacks softened my heart. A birthday dinner where everyone had crowded around with gifts, the smell of candles and cake, the sound of my kids' voices so full of life. Those memories were precious. Yes, but they didn't hurt anymore. They were a reminder that love had existed, that I had been present, and that the thread connecting us hadn't been completely severed. That I glanced out the window again, watching the city lights shimmer there, reflections dancing on the glass. I let a small smile appear, not forced, not triumphant, but quiet and genuine. For the first time that night, I understood exclusion didn't have to feel like erasure. I could still hold on to myself, my dignity, my memories, and even, in a strange way, gratitude for what had once been. Just as I was settling into the quiet rhythm of my meal, my phone buzzed softly on the table. I glanced at it, half expecting another work notification or an irrelevant message. Instead, it was from my kids, a simple, late text. "Sorry, we didn't mean to, we messed up." I stared at the words, my chest tightening for a moment. Part of me wanted to respond immediately, to pour out all the hurt I had carried through the day. But another part, the wiser, quieter part one had been nurturing all evening, urged me to pause. The apology was there, yes, but it didn't erase the exclusion. It didn't change what had happened. And that realization was oddly comforting. Apology received. But my peace isn't waiting on theirs, I thought, my fingers hovering over the screen but not typing. I put the phone down gently, feeling the smooth wood of the table under my hand. I didn't need to reply. I didn't need validation or recognition tonight. I had already chosen my own seat at the table of my life, and it was enough. The restaurant around me felt warmer now, not because of the lights or the music, but because of the quiet satisfaction growing inside me. I could hear laughter from nearby tables, soft conversations, the gentle scrape of cutlery on plates. It all reminded me that life goes on, with or without approval, and that sometimes the only person you need to show up for is yourself. Flashbacks came again, gentle and nostalgic this time. My kids as toddlers, tugging at my hands, their tiny voices full of curiosity and trust. I smiled, feeling a bittersweet tenderness. Nothing about tonight erased those moments, and nothing could take away the love I had for them. Even if it wasn't returned in the way I had hoped. That I leaned back, letting the candlelight flicker over my plate, over my hands, over the quiet determination in my chest. The apology was theirs, the evening was mine. And in that separation, in that quiet acknowledgement, I found closure, not in their words, but in my own acceptance. That I picked up my fork again, savoring the first bite of my meal, letting each flavor settle like a quiet triumph on my tongue. I was still present, still whole, and that alone mattered. Tonight, I was enough to be. By the time my meal arrived, the tension in my chest had loosened almost entirely. The aroma of the food, the warm glow of the candlelight, the gentle hum of the restaurant, it all felt like a quiet celebration, a reminder that I could create joy even when others left me out. I looked down at the plate, savoring the textures, the flavors, the simple perfection of a meal chosen entirely for me. That I thought back to every moment of the day, the silence at home, the sting of exclusion, the cold weight of disappointment. And yet here I was, fully present, fully alive, taking up space in a world that had, for too long, felt like it was moving without me. I had reclaimed tonight, not in anger, not in defiance, but in quiet, deliberate self-respect. I may have been left out, but tonight, I am fully present. I am enough, I thought, a smile tugging at my lips. Not a sarcastic smile, not a forced one, but one born from the simple act of choosing myself over the hurt. It was a small victory, but it was mine, and in this moment, that was all that mattered. That I glanced around the restaurant again, noticing the couples, the laughter, the clinking glasses. Instead of feeling left out, I felt part of something bigger, not because of anyone else, but because I had allowed myself to step into the warmth of the night, to let it in without needing permission. The reflections of city lights on the window danced across my face, and I let myself linger there, content and quietly proud. Flashbacks rose one last time, not of exclusion, but of presence. Birthdays celebrated, tiny hands reaching for mine, laughter spilling over the table. Those moments were still mine, untouched by anyone else's actions. And now, tonight, I had added a new memory, one of strength, dignity, and self-love. That I sipped the wine, let the flavors settle, and leaned back in the chair, letting the comfort of solitude wash over me. I was smiling at my own reflection in the window, the world outside moving and alive. But tonight, I belonged fully to myself. The night wasn't about what I had lost. It was about what I had chosen. Peace, presence, and quiet. Joy. I took another bite, another sip. I realized something profound. Sometimes being left out isn't the end. Sometimes it's an invitation to step into your own power, to claim your own space, and to discover that the best table in the house is the one you set for yourself.